Hello and welcome to happilyeducated.com. I apologize for having neglected this blog for so long. I've just been trying to finish up as much work as possible before the baby arrives so I can relax and spend time with him once he's born. And between dissertation writing and teaching and renovating the house, there's just not a lot of time for anything else, especially considering that my energy level these days is way lower than usual. By about 8 o'clock at night, both my brain and my body are totally wiped out. So blogging will probably continue to be low priority for a few more weeks at least. But for this post, I decided to write about musical development, a topic which I've had to think about a lot lately anyhow for my dissertation. And since it will take more than one post to tell you about my study, in this post I'm just going to sort of give a general overview of other researchers' work on musical development, more or less a summary of current views on the subject. But I should warn you up front that there is one major problem with most studies of musical development, and that is that almost all of them have been conducted in Western countries and looked exclusively at the development of classical musicians. And this is changing. Researchers are starting to look at musical development in other cultures or with other genres, but still, what we know about musical development is severely limited by the context in which it has been studied. So just keep that in mind when deciding whether or not to believe what I say in the rest of this post. Another real complication is that it is unclear what scholars mean when they use the term musical development. Generally, they just tend to avoid defining it. For example, not one of the 30 contributing authors in the book The Child as Musician, a Handbook of Musical Development, presents an explicit definition. And this kind of blows my mind, but I will spare you my rant on that for now. I'll just say that, different researchers have approached the study of musical development from very different angles. Some of them have focused on physiological changes that allow children to engage with music, for example, development of the vocal cords or auditory system, whereas others have looked at cognitive changes that make it possible to perceive specific musical elements like pitch and tonality, whereas still others have attempted to define the sequencing and timing of musical skill acquisition and the effects that musically rich environments and or musical training have on these processes. So basically, the research is complicated and fuzzy, but why dwell on that? We'll just move right along to what we know about musical development. So, with a few exceptions, for example, in people who have literally suffered from some kind of brain damage, it's probably safe to say that everyone develops musically to some extent. Now, most music researchers agree that 1, music is a universal human trait, and 2, human beings are biologically wired to engage in musical behaviors. So, for example, infants are born with almost completely developed, fully developed auditory systems that enable them to perceive pitch and rhythm patterns from a very young age. And musical development is also considered to be a lifelong and typically non-linear process. So basically, your musical development starts from when you are born, or perhaps even before you are born, through to old age, though there may be various ups and downs and changes of direction along the way. Now, although natural talent and giftedness are often thought of as prerequisites for musical ability or exceptional musical ability, the research really doesn't support this idea. Yes, some people are born with certain genetic advantages that contribute to their success in music. For example, certain physical traits or just a quick mind. But those advantages by themselves won't make a great musician. Both genetic and environmental factors contribute to shaping musical development, but no one really understands exactly how this works. So what is clear is that exceptional musicians work really hard. They invest a huge amount of time and energy and effort into developing their skills. And if you want to know more about this, maybe consider checking out my post on the 10,000 hour rule. It's also clear that other people play a major role in shaping your musical development. So your musical beliefs, values, and behaviors are likely to be very similar to the musical beliefs, values, and behaviors of the people around you, specifically your friends and family, because you develop your understanding of what music is through interacting with other people. So, without musical exposure and experience, your musical development is likely to be severely limited or perhaps even non existent. But fortunately, everyone or almost everyone is exposed to music at some point in their lives just because music is present in every culture. So musical development is often compared to language development to illustrate how musical exposure and enculturation in early childhood contribute to musical skill acquisition. And so just like how children who are exposed to a particular language system will learn to speak that language without formal instruction, a child who is exposed to a particularly musical system will learn to perceive and anticipate sounds of that musical system without formal instruction. And interestingly, musical training, exposure, and experience can literally change the structure and function of your brain in various ways. And as a musician, of course, I take great pride in this. I just think it's cool that my brain is wired differently from other people's brains. However, there are certain aspects of musical development that appear to be limited by critical periods of development. Or in other words, if you don't develop some specific skills by a certain age, it may just be too late. But fortunately, this research has mainly looked at things like the development of perfect pitch, which isn't really all that necessary, and many, many fabulous musicians don't have. So if you are a little older and you're still looking to become more musical, don't lose hope. It is not too late. There's no need to panic. Now, contemporary perspectives on musical development also commonly acknowledge that musical attainment may describe a variety of skills, not all of which are required by every single musician. So the skills of a classical musician or let's say a classical singer, for example, may be very, very different from the skills of a hip-hop composer, but both may be equally musically accomplished in their respective fields, although they totally do different things and totally have different skills. So what musical development is it's an extremely broad concept, basically, and not easily summed up in a blog post. Now, and of course, I'm leaving out a million details, but really, more or less, that does sum up the big picture of what we know about musical development. And hopefully my dissertation will contribute a few more details to this overall picture, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one, I guess. And I don't know when I'm going to be getting back to blogging on a regular basis, but I certainly look forward to it, and I appreciate your patience with the wait. And until then, happy learning.